Welcome, everybody, to another episode of News That Didn't Make the Show. On this episode, we are talking about one where there's a bunch of rumors going around. I found about 10 or 12 different articles covering this very topic. So I chose one of them and I'm going to read it, and I'm going to give some opinions on it. This one is Disney could end up buying DC as a result of Warner Media merger. There's been a line of hopeful and some would say misplaced optimism that the upcoming merger between Warner Media and Discovery could result in the restoration and resurrection of the Snyderverse. Of course, we're talking about a potential $100 billion deal between two massive corporations, where most of the major players involved don't even have a background in the feature film business. But that hasn't stopped speculation from making the rounds that whoever takes charge will boot out the old regime and welcome Zack Snyder back into the fold, based entirely on the audience goodwill towards a single HBO Max exclusive, which, if you've listened to our podcast, hasn't actually done anywhere near as well as they were hoping it would. Now, a new report has dived into the ins and outs of this deal, and at this stage, it looks a lot more like Disney could end up buying DC than Justice League 2 or 3 ever happening. Which would certainly be a shocking turn of events, as per the story, AT&T wants out of the entertainment sector altogether. And once the new WarnerDiscovery conglomerate has officially been formed, the company will look to sell it off. This report goes on to say that billionaire businessman John Malone, the largest private landowner in the United States who also holds a stake in Lionsgate and Starz, gave up his voting shares to push the merger through so that Warner Discovery had the flexibility to be sold in the future, with Disney, Apple, Amazon, and Netflix all named as potential suitors. Not only that, but Discovery CEO David Zaslav will be in charge of the new company, and he's got no previous ties to either AT&T or Warner Brothers, which could mean he'd be a lot more open to selling up to the perceived competition than anyone already embedded at either outfit. There are plenty of variables, ifs and buts, but if the Warner Discovery brand does come up for sale, there will be no doubt at least a couple of interested buyers, including Disney. And over here we see just some screenshots throughout the Zack Snyder Justice League. So we have that going for us. But, okay, so I have thoughts on this. Obviously, if Warner Disney gets sold, Disney will absolutely be doing their due diligence in looking at what it would cost to get them. It wouldn't make sense for them to do otherwise. The other problem with this, though, is that Disney has to be very careful. And that is because they're so large and have a significant market share of a lot of various things, including studios, streaming, and comics, that they run the risk of forming monopoly if they purchase too much. Now, if they buy Warner Discovery, the studio aspect, I think they'll be fine in. There's enough competition out there through other things that I don't think buying that studio would run the risk. HBO Max would fall under Disney, and with their recent acquisition of Starz and the fact that they own Hulu as well as Disney Plus, it might be a bit murkier as far as that streaming service goes. But given that Netflix and Amazon Prime are still significant players, there's probably enough competition that it's not going to be a huge issue. Where it becomes an issue is if they acquire DC Comics. Because between Marvel and DC Comics, you are looking at a rather significant portion of the market share. If the main reason neither one of them has issues as a monopoly is because the other one is there as a significant competitor. Unfortunately, none of the smaller companies such as Image, Boom, Dynamite, or Black Horse is really, and there are others, but those are like the four bigger ones that I can think of offhand. None of them are big enough to really challenge for hegemony, which means that if Marvel and DC merged, you'd have such significant control of the market share that there wouldn't be viable competition. That is where you run the risk of running a monopoly. So I could fully see Disney looking at buying WarnerDiscovery and having to do some kind of makeshift deal where DC Comics is not included in that. And it wouldn't be the first time that's happened. A couple years ago, when Disney bought Fox, the sports channels were not included in that deal for that exact reason. Because Disney already owns some sports channels and has a controlling share in others, if they took over Fox Sports, they would have had such a large amount of them that it qualified as a monopoly. And that is where you run into a bunch of legal issues, especially in North America and Western Europe. So they'd have to do something similar where DC Comics would likely not be introduced. And this is where a lot of this stuff comes up as rumors. Because the last time DC was looking at being sold, well, not last time, because obviously got sold to Warner, but before that, it almost got sold to Marvel. The thing is that was in the late 80s, early 90s, and the two of them combined maybe had 50% of the market share. Independents and the smaller companies had such a large portion of the comic industry that there still would have been competition. It wouldn't have formed a monopoly. Nowadays, that's just unfortunately not the case. You still have some great smaller companies, some great independent companies, but their works are just not competitive enough to stop a monopoly from happening when you get these two together. So when you read these articles, keep that in mind, that antitrust laws and monopoly laws are a thing, and that is why DC is likely to not be bought by Disney, even if the rest of the stuff, such as, HBO and Warner Studios, might get bought. And with that, that's the end of this episode. Peace out.